mouth, and I think I have pretty soft hands, but when we go to do barrels, he gets very hot and really chargy. So I have a hard time deciding, well, he has such a soft mouth, but then he gets so hot and chargy. I'm always torn, which...
That is a little bit of a challenge. You know, some of the bits, I don't have one right here on the stage, but like my smooth run bit, it has a lot of gag, but it has a pretty decent long shank as well. When you have gag, when you ride in a gag bit, it provides delay in reaction to your cue because the mouthpiece is attached to a ring on the side of the bit there, and when you pick up on the shank, the mouthpiece slides before it engages basically the curb chain. And so what it does is on a sensitive horse, or a horse that gets really nervous and sensitive, it helps them to know the cue is coming, but the cue doesn't get enforced until the curb chain hits. And so that helps because he's like, oh, I'm nervous, I'm looking off in the stands, and he's like, she's cueing me, I think, she's cueing me, I think, yep, it hit, okay, I was expecting that. When you use like a solid shank bit and you pick up on him, he's like, oh, I didn't like that, oh my gosh, she's so mean, you know. That helps to keep them a little edgier and can make them nervous. However, if he gets strong in his run, where he's nervous and then he gets almost like stiff-necked going the first barrel and you have no control when you get there, then you'd want to use, you know, definitely a bit that can bring him down. Stay in the higher control levels. I've actually seen if a horse is a little strong to the bit and a little out of control, it helps to calm them down sometimes because they understand that someone's in control and it's you, and then you relax, and then he calms down. So, you know, I guess it depends, you know, like with barrel racing, you know, the guys always get frustrated at us because we're like, we don't know what we want, because they are hard to figure out sometimes. They go one way or the other, and so you got to kind of, I guess, mesh to what his needs are. But like I say, a gag bit could help to provide delay in reaction to your cue. It could let him not be as nervous about your cue. However, if he's strong-mouthed, I would say no gag. I would say put a stronger bit on. You'll get out of his mouth more because you have that control, and maybe he'll calm down that way too. So without seeing the horse, that's just some ideas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Molly, I think we could talk about bits all day long
Yeah.
here, but I noticed you got some saddles and saddle pads here by Rainsman, and tell us a little bit about what you got going here.
Sure. Well, the saddle fit deal is such a huge topic right now. Everyone's talking about the gullet, the wider gullet. I've heard all kinds of widths on the gullet, so you know it's just astronomical what we can get into. For me, designing and endorsing a saddle has been opening a can of worms. I started about 10 years ago now, and worked with several different saddle makers on the projects. I've learned that I don't know much. But what we're currently working on right now is the concept that, in my opinion, it's not about the gullet. I like to start with a little bit narrower gullet right now. If you picture a horse's round back, the gullet is the distance between this right here. The bar, the saddle tree has a bar that runs down each side of the horse's back, and that's they have a seat in here which is connects the bars with the cantle and the swells. The front of the bars up here, of course, are covered with leather right now, but inside the saddles they're either wood or rawhide covered polyurethane, which mine are. The distance right here is what we're talking about when we talk about measuring the gullet. That width allows, that's what sits on your horse's back. And so people are talking about wider gullets. That way your saddle can sit down on the horse's back and potentially make better surface contact with his back and avoid the pressure points. Because if it makes a larger surface contact area, then there won't be one small area making contact to dig in and pinch. But the problem arises when you have a wooden tree that is, and you're trying to fit it to thousands of different horses that are made all differently, all fed different feeds. They're all made, they're just different. And so it's really hard to get that wide gullet, the idea, that theory, it's hard to enforce that. When a saddle sits down too far on a horse's back and then doesn't fit correctly, it can rock back and forth. If you've ever heard of someone saying, my saddle's pinching my horse's back, the reason is that is a wide gullet or wrong angle of the bars, and it's not making great surface area contact. Surface area contact meaning the bars aren't sitting flush against his back muscles. What we want to do, or what I've worked on with Rainsman, is developing a tree that has the ability, if it's not touching correctly, to expand and contour to the fit of the horse's back, to the curves of the horse's back. What we've done to help troubleshoot the potential of the saddle expanding too much is to cover these polyurethane bars with rawhide, which gives it integrity and gives you a firm saddle underneath to support your weight for barrel racing. But what's really the key to saddle fit, in my opinion, is the angle of the bars. The angle, not the width of the gullet, the angle. Because your horse's back, whether he be a thick-muscled, wide, fat horse, or a narrow, young, thoroughbred type back, the angle is going to be different. Narrower for the thoroughbred, younger, less developed back, and wider for the really muscled up, fatter type horse. So we've started with a narrower gullet, and our bars are able to expand off a pressure point or out for a wider horse and able to fit a wider variety of horses. The angle of the bars on different saddles is going to be really hard to keep track of in a solid wood tree. There are several really good wood trees that can fit a wide variety of horses, but I don't think one solid mold can fit every horse. That's why I've developed the Freedom Fit saddle, which has the poly bars and the ability to expand. In my opinion, there should never be a reason for this saddle to pinch into a horse's back because of the ability to expand. And when you're looking at a saddle fit, consider your feed program as well. When you're feeding a high protein, high fat feed, you're going to see hopefully some development over his loins, over the lower part of his back. That's going to play a key role in saddle fit. If your horse has narrower loins or thinner, or if he's younger and less developed, if riding a 3-year-old that just hasn't built all his muscle yet, your narrower type saddles are going to work better. If you have a horse that's just really, really wide back and fat, you're going to want to look for, not necessarily will a wide gullet saddle hurt you, but you want to look for a wide angle of bars, a full quarter horse bars. That's what we call that, wider bars. So, like I said, I'm really happy with the Freedom Fit saddle because of its ability to cover all those bases, expand out for the wider horses, and definitely start with a fit that is fit for the baseline horse that is just of moderate development. In order to troubleshoot some of those wider horses, we developed the Freedom Fit pad. When you buy a well-made saddle, which you should, it's very important what saddle you ride. It's more important to ride a better fitting saddle and a thinner pad than a really thick pad protecting your horse from a very ill-fitting saddle. It's pretty much a losing game in my opinion. So with the confidence I have in my saddles, I developed a pad that helps to enhance the fit even more. It's thinner underneath the bars of the saddle. It's about 7/8 of an inch, I guess. And it's thicker underneath the skirts. When you buy a well-made saddle like the ones we produce at Rainsman, it has thick skirts, good integrity to the leather, and the skirts actually help to balance the fit of the saddle on your horse's back. If you've ever had a saddle that rolled on your horse, consider one thing. If you had a pad that had more padding underneath the skirts, it would help to stabilize your saddle and and prevent the rolling and rocking. If your skirts are cheap and roll up, or if you don't have a pad that helps give stability right underneath the skirts, your saddle can rock. And I do feel like that's the precursor to saddle pinching. It rocks, and the ill-fitting saddle goes ahead and hits and pinches. So the Freedom Fit pad helps to balance your saddle on your horse's back. It's made of superior quality wool. I have never had it rub, and I truly, truly have worked really hard on this pad and feel like it's one of the best barrel pads ever because of the ability to enhance saddle fit, prevent soreness and saddle rocking, and it's lightweight and is real good quality wool felt. So there's that. You also notice that I have over and under rope. I always ride with an over and under rope on my saddle, and that's to prevent any gait problems with my horse. Any problems potentially out on the pattern or in the competition arena start in the exercise pen. And so if my horse doesn't want to move out, your cue to go is just as important as your cue to whoa. So anytime you ask a horse to move out, we're riding with a barrel racing rein and we're ready to go. If you're not riding with spurs, you're pretty much at their mercy if a horse decides not to go. However, it probably stems back to the practice pen. If he wanted to be lazy about moving out and didn't want to go, if you had an over and under rope to reach back, tap him on the hip, make him move out, that would probably train him later in life to go ahead and go into the alley, run fast, free in the run, and have that rapport set early on. So I always ride with an over and under rope, which you can also find from my line there.
And I would just like to add, just through catalog sales, for sure that saddle pad is probably one of our best-selling barrel saddle pads that we have. And so I do highly recommend Molly's whole line. Her bits, all made in America, everything is high quality. Her standards are very high, which is good. I mean, it's very good to have high standards because you want the best product for your horses. So, so yeah, I will definitely back her up and say that this is some of the best product that's out there.
Folks, we're here with 10-time NFR qualifier Molly Powell. Is there any questions in the audience as far as saddles and saddle pads go? Molly, I've got a question real quick. I've heard different, what's a good sign, you know, if you're trying different saddles, you know, I've always heard you talking about dry spots or if the hair's smooth, or what's a good sign to let you know, I guess soreness is another thing, but how do we check to see if our saddle actually fits or not?
That's a really good question. You know, there's all types of debates on that because a few things can come into play when you're talking about the dry spots. First of all, the type of pad you're using. If it lets your horse breathe, if it's breathable, then you're going to see a little bit different wear pattern there. And also how long you ride your horse. If you go out and ride him for 15 minutes and you don't see any, you know, wet spots or dry spots, you know, that might be a little different than a cowboy who's riding his horse all day long, who's going to ride him several hours and is really going to show. For barrel racing, you know, when we're riding these horses a half an hour at a time, I don't know that a lot of these newer quality saddles are going to sore them up too badly. But if you're looking for ultimate fit for performance and competition and trying to really get the highest level of performance out of your saddle, if you look at your horse's back after you get done riding, the dry spots are where the saddle is making surface area contact. It's kind of backwards in your mind. The wet spots are where it's not. It's allowing the sweat to come to the surface. The larger the dry spot, the more area your saddle is making contact. So you actually, when you're riding your horse for 15 to 30 minutes, or potentially, you know, a short exercise or warming up from the barrel race and running, a lot of times you shouldn't see one small dry spot and a ton of wet spots. You should see fairly dry. Now, if a horse is sweating, then it might be all sweaty underneath there because the sweat has finally come out. So if you see, you know, what they're talking about, the prototypical small circle underneath your pad, or when you take your saddle off and it's dry, that means your saddle is pinching because that is making it's holding the air in, and air is, when your saddle is not touching, the air is allowing the sweat to come off their back and release and run down. So, you know, like I said, you got to take a few factors into effect, but when you see those small round circles that are dry, yeah, you need to look for a new saddle. Probably it's not making the best contact with your horse's back. So.
Very good. Any more questions about saddles and saddle pads?
I have one more thing to add. I think one of the biggest misconceptions I see when people purchase saddles is people riding too big of saddles. Just the other day I was talking to Brock Hansen, who's competing at the NFR, and I was looking at his saddle, and he was riding a 13.5-inch seat. Pretty mid-sized guy, I think, competing at the NFR, and he's riding a 13.5-inch seat, and I was like, wow, I could almost ride that saddle. That's so small. What the new concept that's come out in the last few years is hip placement. For performance, we want to be right where we need to be when we need to be. If you're riding too big of a seat and you have the ability to slide back to the back of your seat when your horse takes off and accelerates, then you can't be up where you need to be when you need to be potentially. So yeah, I don't have a problem with people being used to a certain size seat. They ride an unconventionally larger size seat because that's what they do well. But the ideal, the people at the NFR, the people that are doing the best, are riding to lean towards the smaller seats. My husband, you know, he's one of those people that I'm very jealous of because he can eat anything and stays really thin. He was also riding a 13.5-inch seat up until a couple of years ago, and he actually did go to a 14-inch seat now. Sometimes I wonder if he shouldn't be back in the 13-inch because of the powerful horses. Sometimes he feels like he's coming back. But a lot of barrel racers, I give this simple general seat guide. If you're riding, if your size, jean size is a 1, 2, or 3, 4, you probably need to be riding a 13-inch seat. If your jean size is about a 5, 6, 7, 8, a 13.5-inch seat. 9, 10, 11, 12, you can go on to the 14-inch seat and go from there. You can kind of get an idea. A lot of people need to be moved down to the smaller seats, and that will keep you in place. when you want to urge your horse forward, you lean your top of your body forward, but your hips and your main part of your legs and stuff, they don't need to be sliding back and forth. That's only hindering your horse. So that's a good piece of advice. I strongly encourage that.
I think that also helps with balance too. It also helps with
Right.
coming back to the horsemanship side of it. It's such a huge part of it, but it helps with your balance and keeping you balanced in the center of your horse as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It sure does. Keeps your legs from going out behind you.
Any more questions?